Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Bannon, Airspeed Prime here with my second Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle 2012 review for the new Nickelodeon TMNT show. And this is going to be my review of episode 3 of the show, so 103. And the name of this episode is Turtle Temper. I believe that's what it's called, because it's kind of odd that they don't actually say what the name of the episode is, and you have to rely on like what the TV listings say it's called. So anyway, before I get into my review on that episode, there's a few other things, also Turtles related, that I want to talk about. The first of which is a kind of other story, kind of a non-show, kind of canon story for this cartoon. And you can find that stuff on the nick.com website in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles section. There are 6 kind of short web comics that are kind of web comics are basically kind of animated comics, and they have voice acting in them, like from the voice actors for the show. And the story of these webcomics are basically, I believe it's set before episode 1, and basically how the turtles earn the kind of title ninja, how they earn the right to be called ninjas. And basically the way it's done is that issue 1 of the webcomic and issue 6 of the webcomic focus on all the turtles together, but the 4 in the middle focus on one of each of the turtles. So you then have each of them kind of getting kind of tested on their kind of weakness as a character. So Raph gets tested on his anger, as is in kind of the same in this episode, but they've done it a bit differently. Leo's tested on his kind of leadership, confidence. Donatello's kind of tested on the fact that he's kind of most behind in terms of the fighting skills than his brothers and stuff like that. He thinks he's not as good as them. And Mikey's kind of tested on his focus, because he's not very focused. He's tested on, does he actually take anything in and stuff like that. So it's very interesting, and like Splinter plays the role of kind of giving them all advice on this, how to basically get through these kind of tests and earn their rank. So they're very interesting. I really urge you to go check them out. If you're not from America, use the free program TunnelBear to access the nick.com site. That's a little tip that I use, because obviously I'm from Ireland and that's the only way I can get onto that website. The second thing I wanted to talk about a bit was, I didn't cover it in the first video, but the intro to the show, it's very important, because Turtle shows are really, their intros of them are very kind of trademarked to them, and they kind of play a big role, I suppose. They're such an integral part of the Turtles. And I actually really like the intro to this show. A lot of people have kind of complained and said that they don't like the way it's kind of all hip-hop, bit of rap in it. But I like the way it's done. It's not really kind of rappy in that, I think I just made up a new word there, but I like the way it's kind of more upbeat than, it's very upbeat, kind of inspirational sort of thing. It's quite done. It's kind of like pop rap almost, I guess would be the way to describe it. And I like the way it tells you a little bit about the characters. You know, Leo's the turtle in blue and stuff like that. Michelangelo's the wild one. I like the way it does that for all the turtles, and it's just edited together really well with all the stuff. I like the intro. But onto the actual episode, 103, Turtle Temper. Obviously what this episode is about is basically Raph learning to deal with his anger, his flaw as a character. I said in my last review that how this show does characterization and story going forward would be very important. And while we don't really get much story kind of in this episode, we do get really nice character stuff, and this episode has kind of shown to me that this show can do the characterization of the turtles really well. And obviously this episode deals with that by Raphael coming into contact with a very angry human who takes a video of the turtles, and then basically how he gets that back as the turtles also deal with a conflict with the Krang, who are still invading the laboratories, kind of getting scientists and tech. But episode 3 of any show, or more specifically the first episode after the intro, is going to be very important for any show, because you get away from the kind of special event that is the introductory episodes, and you see what just a normal episode of the show is going to be like. So how the first one of those works out is very interesting. And in this case it works out really well, because we get a focus on one of the turtles to give, rather than just all of them as a group characterization, you get kind of more in depth on one of them, and then because the focus is on one of them, you get the other turtles reacting in a different way. In this case, in this episode, the little points I'm going to talk about are Raphael as a character, and like what he goes through in this episode. He is the focus. Splinter in the advice that he gives Raphael. The little bits of Leonardo that we have in this episode. I guess Mikey will also come into play with the Raph bit of the episode. And then the human character Vic, or as he later becomes in this episode, Spiderbite, because he's mutated. And that's pretty much all there is about this episode, and I'll talk a little bit about story in going forward in the Turtles after that. But first of all, Raphael in this episode. Now, since kind of like the 2003 show, Raphael's characterization as a turtle has always been that he's the best fighter, he's the angriest one, and that anger sometimes gets in the way of kind of his teamwork and affects kind of the fact that he is the best fighter. And we see that how much his anger is actually affecting the group as a whole. He kind of blows their cover, which for ninjas and for them, they can't get spotted by anyone. For that to be a constant threat with him, with the group, is a really big problem, as shown at the start of this episode, when just a little kind of poke, some prodding from Michelangelo gets him so angry that, one, he isn't aware that he breaks something on the top of this roof they're on, but also basically gets the Krang onto their, like where they are. This is a big problem. Later on in the same episode, when they're actually fighting the Krang down on the street after confronting Vic, he does kind of a similar thing where they're in the middle of a fight and he basically leaves Leo to fight the Krang all alone, and he goes off to basically argue with Vic, which is a big problem because, you know, like, if the Krang were better fighters, Leonardo could have been like pretty badly injured because he's kind of there on the ground, hunched over, kind of getting kicked by the Krang robot. So like, it's a big problem, and the scene where Splinter basically shows an example to Raphael of why his anger is a big issue when he asks the other turtles to fire arrows at Raphael. And at first, you know, he dodged them instantly, but when Splinter tells them all to insult Raphael, then his anger gets the better of him and he can't basically do the same skills that made him easily dodge the arrows. The insults really get to him, and despite them just being kind of joking, kind of play insults, you kind of feel bad for Raphael and that they're just hurling them at him. They're like really enjoying this, but you really see that Raphael gets so like frustrated by them, and he ends up with like so many arrows kind of stuck to him. It's just, it really shows you like this how serious the problem for Raphael is. So I really liked that scene. It was really good. The way that it's kind of dealt with going forward, with Raph, is that like when Leo sends him home, I'll talk more about that in itself later. He kind of comes home and talks to his turtle Spike, which is interesting that he comes back again. It's a funny moment for him. Raph can only kind of come out of his shell to this his pet turtle, and he basically says to himself that my anger makes me a better fighter, when in fact it doesn't. It kind of means he doesn't think enough about the fighting and stuff like that, so he gets kind of beaten more often. And this is where Splinter comes into the episode and plays an important role, because Splinter, you know, gives him like, this is where I think having Splinter be a human kind of comes into its own and not just be a rat, in that he has those kind of human experiences that he can like give advice to the turtles on, and we get more of that story of him and Oroku Saki and the kind of woman that came between them, and that Splinter was a bit like Raphael in the past, and he got angry at Oroku Saki and lost his temper, which ultimately led to what happened with his daughter and wife dying, basically. And this kind of plays an impact on Raphael with the advice that he gives him, like, just like, let it wash over you like water over stone. Raphael says that then in the fight, and ultimately that's where the turtles kind of gain the upper hand in the fight. And it was just really well done, that really nice scene between Raphael and Splinter, even showing the kind of funny side of Splinter with the whole, you know, Spike, do you want to hear a story? And if you want to hear a story, munch on your leaf, and he does it after Raphael had done the same thing. It's just really funny bits. The other little part I wanted to talk about that I mentioned there was the fact that after the second time Raphael's anger gets in the way of the group, Leonardo as leader makes the decision to send Raphael home because they can't basically trust him in the fight. And I thought this was really good characterization, little moment for Leo in the episode to show that he is making good decisions as a leader, and that he just decides there and then, I'm sending you home. And then Raphael, as has been set up in episode 1, tries to like say that Leonardo's kind of going on a power trip, but the others agree with him. So, and you know it's a big moment when Michelangelo is even serious in this moment. He says, as Michelangelo walks off, he's like, "Sorry, Raph." No, like making fun of him at all. It's really good scene for Leo, showing that he's making the good decisions, and that ultimately Leo sending Raph home and him talking to Splinter works out, and Raphael comes back and helps the group. Vic as a character then, who eventually becomes Spider-Bite. Very interesting that, you know, them breaking the satellite on the roof was what brought Vic's attention up to the top of the roof. He took the video, ran away, they're forced to like come after him, and because they come after him, they have to come out in the open, which gets the Krang in on them. It's a very well kind of constructed thing that way. And you kind of grow to kind of dislike Vic throughout the episode, because he's only interested in doing this to make money and stuff like that. He's obsessed with his phone and stuff like that, and he's just as angry as Raph. He's a kind of big insulting guy in this episode, so you really don't like him all that much, especially when, even when he's captured and the turtles come back to help him, all he's interested in is his phone. So, you know, when he gets mutated, you kind of go like, that's a bit harsh on Vic, but really he wasn't a nice guy. And it's interesting in that, like, that's two, basically one episode 1 and 2 together as one episode, and this episode, 2 humans mutated straight away, and he's mutated into Spider-Bites, and he has a vendetta against the turtles, just like Snake in the opening episode. So I get the feeling that they're almost setting up that a lot of the humans that come into contact with the turtles are going to get mutated, and are going to have to work together against the turtles. I suppose, so I kind of like the way Vic was done in this episode, presenting the conflict with Raph. But the final thing I want to talk about is just, I suppose, how the story is kind of developing in this. And I suppose they really don't make much mention to like what the Krang are doing in this episode. Like, they just said they're kind of like raiding a laboratory to steal something. So they're definitely setting up for like all of this is going to come together. They're building something big. I'm just kind of wondering what it is, and I hope soon enough they actually explain to us what's going on, because if they go too many episodes with just saying, oh, the Krang are doing this, the Krang are doing that, and not say what it's for too long, it's going to be a bit annoying. But I kind of like that they're still doing that within an episode, because they didn't have to have the Krang in this episode to make it work, but it just added to the story to happen there. So I really liked episode 3, looking forward to episode 4, which looks really interesting, and the introduction of Shredder and his new kind of first lieutenant guy. It's going to be interesting, episode 4. So thank you for watching this video, and bye.